Hi, I'm Val, your opera guide. Today we're taking a look at the Irish National Opera 2026-2027 season. Because Irish National Opera is my home opera company, this isn't simply a list of productions I'll be reviewing over the coming year. It's a season I'll be living with. Some of these operas I've known for years. Some I've listened to countless times. One of them I've never seen performed live. Another is a brand new work that none of us has experienced before. And that's one of the things I love most about opera. No matter how much repertoire you've explored, there's always something waiting around the corner. A character you've never met, a piece of music you've never heard, a production that changes your mind about a work you thought you understood. So rather than simply telling you what's coming this season, I want to talk about why I'm excited about it. Because when I look at this season as a whole, I don't just see 6 productions. I see 6 very different answers to the same question. What happens when people find themselves face to face with forces larger than themselves? Love, power, faith, tradition, society, fate, and occasionally their own terrible decisions, especially their own terrible decisions. Testament, the thrill of not knowing. Let's begin with the production that fascinates me most. Not because it's the biggest, not because it's the most famous, but because none of us knows exactly what it's going to become. Testament. One of the strangest things about reviewing opera is that most of the time we arrive carrying decades of expectations. Before Carmen begins, we already know the habanera. Before Turandot starts, we know someone is going to sing Nessun Dorma. But Testament offers something increasingly rare: discovery. We're all starting from the same place: the audience, the critics, the performers, even me. That's exciting. Based on Colm Tóibín's acclaimed novel The Testament of Mary, this world premiere explores one of history's most familiar stories from a deeply personal perspective. Not theology, not doctrine, not legend, memory. And if opera is uniquely good at anything, it's giving voice to emotions too large for ordinary speech. I suspect this may become one of the productions people are still talking about long after the season ends. Carmen, the opera everyone knows, or thinks they do. Now let's talk about Carmen. Even if you've never attended an opera, you've probably already met Carmen. You may not realize it, but you've met her. She's been appearing in films, commercials, television shows, cartoons, and concert halls for more than a century. Opera has been quietly sneaking Carmen into popular culture for generations. But familiarity can be deceptive, because Carmen isn't really about seduction, and it isn't really about romance. It's about freedom. Or perhaps more accurately, it's about what happens when someone refuses to be possessed. One of the reasons Carmen survives is that every generation sees her differently. Some view her as reckless, others see her as fearless. Some admire her, others blame her. The argument never ends, and that's exactly why she's interesting. I suspect audiences will walk into the theater humming the music and walk out debating the characters. The Bartered Bride in Which Nobody Dies. Let's be honest, opera has a reputation. If you tell someone you're going to the opera, there's a good chance they'll respond with something like, "So who dies?" And it's a fair question. Opera has not exactly been shy about tragedy. But then along comes The Bartered Bride, a comic opera built around misunderstandings, young love, family expectations, and enough chaos to keep everyone moving at top speed. In other words, nobody is trying to stab anyone. At least, not as part of the central plot. And that's refreshing. Comedy is often harder than tragedy. A tragic scene can survive a mistake. Comedy cannot. Comedy depends on timing, precision, rhythm. The audience has to laugh at exactly the right moment. When it works, it feels effortless. When it doesn't, everyone notices. I'm particularly curious to see how Irish National Opera handles the comic pacing, because great comic opera is one of the hardest things to pull off. Les Boréades, the opera that sends you to Google. Every season needs one title that makes audiences pause and say, "Wait, what's that one?" For me, that's Les Boréades. And I mean that as a compliment. Every great opera company needs at least one production that invites audiences into unfamiliar territory. The opera you didn't know you needed. The composer you've never explored. The work that makes you take a chance. Rameau's final opera has everything you could possibly want from 18th century French opera. Gods, storms, political intrigue, impossible love. Magnificent dance music, and probably a few things that only made sense in 18th century France. What excites me most is that this is exactly the sort of production that can create new opera lovers. Sometimes the production you know least about becomes the one you remember most. Turandot. No indoor voice whatsoever. Then comes Turandot. If opera had a setting marked maximum volume, this would be it. Giant choruses, massive orchestral forces, enormous vocal demands, towering emotions, and of course, Nessun Dorma, the aria so famous that many people know the melody without realizing it comes from opera. But here's what fascinates me about Turandot. For all its scale and spectacle, the emotional center of the opera may not be the title character at all. Many audience members arrive expecting to be captivated by Princess Turandot, and leave talking about Liu, the servant girl whose humanity provides the beating heart of the drama. That's one of opera's oldest tricks. The biggest stories often hide the most intimate emotions. Eugene Onegin, the world's worst relationship decision. And finally, Eugene Onegin, or as I occasionally think of it, the world's most beautiful opera about making a terrible decision. Imagine receiving the most heartfelt love letter of your life. A letter so honest and vulnerable that it leaves the writer emotionally exposed, and deciding, no thanks. That's the beginning of Eugene Onegin. The rest of the opera explores the consequences. Tchaikovsky understood something fundamental about human nature. Some mistakes hurt because they're unavoidable. Others hurt because they're entirely our own fault. Those are often the hardest to live with. Of all the operas this season, this may be the one that leaves audiences emotionally shattered. And I mean that in the best possible way. Looking at the season as a whole. When I step back and look at this season, what strikes me isn't its variety, though there is certainly plenty of that. What strikes me is the consistency of its questions. Who has power? Who belongs? Who chooses freedom? Who chooses duty? What do we owe one another? And what happens when we get it wrong? Those questions connect every production in this season, from Testament to Eugene Onegin, from Carmen to Turandot, from Baroque mythology to contemporary Ireland. Opera changes costumes. Opera changes languages. Opera changes musical styles. But the human questions remain remarkably constant. And perhaps that's why these works continue to speak to us. Not because they are old, but because they are enduring. Some of these productions will surprise me. Some will challenge me. One or two may completely overturn my expectations. There will almost certainly be a performance I think I understand before opening night, and see very differently by the time the curtain falls. That's the magic of live performance. No matter how much preparation we do, the most important thing hasn't happened yet. The orchestra hasn't played the first note. The curtain hasn't risen. The audience hasn't taken its seats. For now, these productions exist as possibilities. Over the next year, they'll become experiences, and I'll be there for all of them. I hope you'll join me. I'll see you at the stage door, where the conversation about opera always continues.